Hello everybody, I am Rue and welcome to my cozy corner of booktube, Rue with the Books. Oh, bloody hell, it's a bit hot in the UK today. In this video I will be answering a series of prompts in the Travel Around the World book tag, giving recommendations of books for various different genres and books that hit certain niches. I hope that you stick around and enjoy the fun book vibes around here and maybe even leave with a book to add to your TBR. Thank you David G for tagging me in this. It's been a long few weeks with some absolutely massive colossal behemoths of books, so I'm not quite yet ready for the next Talking Books video. This is the exact kind of video I would have wanted to make, just to kind of refresh myself a little bit and reminisce on some of those good old books that I've read a while ago. Be sure to press the like button to send my videos out internationally and press the subscribe button too while you're down there to get weekly booktube uploads from myself. Be sure to grab a beverage, hot or cold, and let's get down to business. Prompt number 1 is UK and Republic of Ireland. Known for history, culture, arts and literature, talk about an older book or classic that you have read and loved. If you have watched my last video, the top 10 books I have read since starting my channel, then you may remember that I ranked Catch-22 as my number 1 book. I've talked about this book absolutely loads over the course of making videos on this channel, and while I do really recommend it, let's pick something else to answer this prompt. So, I am going to suggest the absolute poster child of classic literature, Jane Eyre by Charlotte Bronte. I read this book a few months ago and it's a book that I just keep thinking about, just with how much I enjoyed it. How wonderful the characters are, how perfect the pacing is, as well as all of its little quips and quirks that make it such a fun, memorable and amazing book. It follows Jane from her early childhood into adulthood, going through several different character arcs throughout. We start in a mansion where Jane is physically and mentally abused by her family. She builds up a large sense of loathing kind of for her situation, and she thinks that despite it all, it's better than being poor to live in this abusive household, because at least it's a mansion and they have all of these nice possessions and stuff. There are several sections of this book, starting with her childhood at this abusive household, her time at an orphan school, which really shapes her and molds her into the person that she eventually becomes, and then after all that, her adventures at Thornfield Hall, which is really very much the meat and potatoes of this book. Jane Eyre is a romance story between her and Mr. Darcy. I'm not really a big romance reader, but this book genuinely wowed me. It's not really in your face, it's rather subtle and very classy, and by the end of it you just really root for these characters. There are roadblocks, you question how things turn out. Mr. Rochester, the love interest, kind of keeps you on your toes, and it's got a really interesting mystery that highlights some of the dingy and dark secrets that lie underneath the depths of Thornfield Hall. This book has practically everything. A great lead, a great love interest, a great mystery, amazing pacing, brilliant character growth, twists, turns, beautiful descriptions and prose, all while being absolutely accessible for a classic. I totally understand why everybody loves this book, because I did too. So, if you haven't read Jane Eyre yet and you've been on the fence about adding it to your TBR or just picking it up right now, then I hope that this has finally convinced you. Prompt number 2 is Australia, a beautiful country with wildlife found nowhere else on Earth. Talk about a book that has an original and unique premise. For prompt number 2, I am going to go with John Dies at the End by Jason Pargin / David Wong. At a surface level, this book isn't really that unique. It's basically the Supernatural TV show with Sam and Dean Winchester. However, there is one aspect of this book which transforms absolutely everything and makes it mind-bendingly unique. The characters are on this drug called soy sauce, which kind of merges their worlds with another, just overlaps them one on the other. The worlds essentially have overlap, as I said, but the stuff they see from this alternate dimension is totally real and starts existing within their own realm. It adds this snappy, uncomfortable aspect of cosmic horror to this book. Soy Source doesn't just overlap these worlds though. People on Soy Source also become hyper intelligent, obtaining the skills to kind of perform these like Sherlock Holmes level deductions about people and things. It also kind of speeds up the rate at which neurons and electrical impulses fire, allowing them to process information and make decisions at absolutely lightning speed. That's it. The characters don't really have any special powers beyond that. It's a bit of an investigation kind of story, told kind of like a false autobiography. It's told from the lens of David Wong recounting this story to a journalist that just doesn't believe him. And he's kind of, over the course of the story, just really trying to convince him that what he's saying is real because, well, it's like the biggest story on the planet. There are a lot of twists and a lot of turns, lots of fun action and absolutely fantastic horror elements. The characters are also pretty good. I loved David and John as the two main leads, having absolutely different personalities, and they just get into all sorts of trouble over the course of this book. This book is pretty gaudy and contains a lot of very campy fun. If you want a short-ish book to pick up that ticks all of the boxes for something different, kind of mind-bending with cosmic horror and a pretty terrifying villain, then this is absolutely great. I won't recommend this book to everybody though. This book has a lot of foul language with the N and R slurs being used constantly. It's pretty much the main reason why I didn't rate this book 5 stars, because everything else was just perfect. After these slurs were used a few times, I started to roll my eyes at every subsequent time. I don't feel like it added very much to the story, it just made it feel a little bit more edgy. And the thing is, this book is already edgy enough, so it didn't need it to kind of pinhole itself into that kind of style. Maybe it's a relic of its time, as this book was written in 2007, you know, internet culture was very, very different with Xbox game chats and Skype calls and prank calls and all that kind of thing. But this book would have stood the test of time a little bit more without it, because, you know, it's a very perfect, well-rounded, fun story without that aspect of it. So future-proof your books, folks. Prompt number 3 is New Zealand, a land of breathtaking beauty. Talk about a book, fiction or non-fiction, where the setting, real or imagined, is so stunning that you want to live there. I am going to go in an completely opposite direction for this one. I'm going to answer with a cozy, witchy fantasy series that I love very much and is close to my little heart, called Myrtlewood Mysteries. I caught up to this series, and I think it's got 8 or 9 books, a few months ago, and the setting of this book is absolutely magical. The series follows a mother and daughter duo called Rosemary and Athena. They've inherited this kind of magical house from Rosemary's grandma, and with it, their role as the most powerful witches of Myrtlewood. The caveat is, at the start of the series, they don't even know any magic. So, they very much over the course of the series have to grow into this role and its responsibilities, as well as everything else that comes along with it. What I love about this setting is how tight-knit the entire Myrtlewood community is. You practically get to know everybody that lives in this village. You get to know the kids at school, the people running the businesses, the lawyers, the police people. They all have such incredibly fun interactions with one another, and the world feels incredibly alive because of it. I kind of feel like the author Iris Beaglehole has written a book version of Crack, specifically made for me with this series. What else makes the setting of this series so wonderful? Well, aside from the characters and how cozy and magical this village feels, there are also these magical festivals that take place, and they're kind of center stage to each book's plot. Celebrating harvests, celebrating gods, celebrating seasons, and having these fantastic party-like festivals for them. We see the preparation, the execution, and how everybody in Myrtlewood comes together. You really get this sense of community. Aside from this, as I mentioned already, because some of them celebrate seasons, this world feels quite alive because you have different environments and foliage and plants, and you can kind of imagine everything over the course of the series as the year goes on, and the weather gets hotter and colder and everything like that. And just to add something else, there's also a fairy realm with its own set of foliage and environment and plants and matter and everything. The series is called Myrtlewood Mysteries, and each book has its own mystery for Athena and Rosemary to unveil and solve, and it also keeps you engaged with the plot while absolutely adoring the setting. There is a spin-off series called Myrtlewood Crones. I haven't read it yet, but if I feel like some more witchy fun, I'll consider picking it up. Otherwise, I'll definitely read some more mainline books as they come out. These books are very short. I read each one over the course of 3 or 4 days. The chapters are also very short. You kind of just constantly want to read more and find out what happens next. It's a really fun series, and if you don't care about just reading incredibly literary, serious books, then this is a fun one to pick up for you. Prompt number 4 is France, which has Paris, the City of Love. Talk about a book that you enjoyed where a love story is either central to the plot or is just present in the story. This does not have to be a romance or erotica novel. I don't really read much romance, and I've already burned Jane Eyre for my classic book pick, so I'm going to have an answer that is a little bit out of the box for this one, but love is very much a central theme of this story. For this prompt, my answer is Prophet Song by Paul Lynch. This book follows a mother who, essentially over the course of the story, looks out for her children. Her husband, very early on into the book, is arrested for being the leader of a union in a kind of Irish dictatorship. And now she is the sole carer for her children, the only parental figure in the household. It's a very depressing story, so if you want a fun romance or love story, this is definitely not what you want to pick up. Kids are still kids in this book. They have their own emotions, they can't easily be controlled or handled, and they still have their own motivations, they make their own decisions. It's really sad to see how, despite everything and her doing her best, sometimes it's kind of like fighting the wind. What makes the story incredibly unique for me is that it just follows a mother who wants to keep her children safe, in a setting that keeps getting worse and more desperate and disastrous. We see the way that people are conscripted to fight against the rebels. We see how patrols are set up, temporary borders, restrictions on travel and getting passports, and the likes, and just more and more. It just keeps getting worse. The mother is totally powerless against this. It's not a story where the main character stands up against the regime like Red Rising. It's a story where a mother gets more and more desperate and has to do more and more to keep her children safe. It's a slice of life book with a dystopian twist. As she lives her life under this dictatorship regime, she has to navigate a line between risk and reward. With a baby, she has to go to the shop to get milk and formula, nappies, etc. When bombs are starting to get dropped and she can hear gunfire in the distance, and there's all of these army vehicles and people in uniform, and there's civilians being unjustly killed. It's a very powerful story, and unfortunately this kind of setting that it sets up is a story as old as time. It's not for the faint of heart, and it has an absolutely crazy, haunting ending. Prompt number 5, Germany. Oktoberfest, the world's largest beer festival. Name and talk about a book where wild celebrations and crazy parties are part of the storyline. Myrtlewood Mysteries would also be a brilliant pick for this prompt, but kind of like I burned Jane Eyre, now I've burned Myrtlewood Mysteries, so I have to come up with something else. So I am going to go for a wild card here and throw One Piece into the mix. If you don't know what One Piece is about, well, it's a pirate story about Monkey D. Luffy, who aims to become the king of the pirates. To achieve this, he has to find the 4 road poneglyphs scattered around the world, which kind of, when combined and the information is kind of unencrypted, will unveil the location that the previous pirate king has left his treasure. Other people also seeking treasure are working towards the same goal, and they stand in his way, and he has to defeat them and their ideologies and, you know, their armies, their crews, to be able to progress towards achieving his dream. It's an absolutely colossal story. It's about adventure, found family. It's epic, emotional, silly, fun, beautiful, horrible. It tackles so many themes over the course of its over 1,000 chapters, where this kind of story is split into arcs that make up different islands that they end up at. And each arc and island has its own themes that it tackles. So yeah, the story is very, very broad, and it's not even finished yet. We see Luffy kind of form his crew over the course of the story, getting these gut-punching backstories for all of them. We see how they grow together, how their friendships develop, what they would do for one another in the kind of face of all of this overwhelming power and oppression that they have to keep facing with all of these enemies. The series has two magic systems. The first is called Devil Fruits, where there's only a person can only have one devil fruit, and each devil fruit is unique, and until the person that kind of uses these devil fruit powers dies, it won't kind of reincarnate into the world. So only one devil fruit user of any type is existing within the world at any time, and they have such a wide breadth of powers from, well, the main character has the gum gum fruit, so he's stretchy, but there's people with fire powers, ice powers, light powers, gravity powers, smoke powers, sand powers, literally anything you can think of. There's also a second power system called Haki, which is very, very broad, and it allows people to kind of steal their skin and make themselves very hard, or kind of impose their will upon other people. So yeah, all of this is very fluid and works very, very well together, and it kind of leads to some very, very fun and interesting fight scenes over the course of the series. Each crew member on the ship also plays their own role. None of them overlap, so, you know, there's no kind of unnecessary people. Luffy's the captain. He's got his right-hand man, who's just, you know, a swords person. He's got a chef. He's got a navigator. He's got a helmsman. He's got a kind of botanist, and he's got an archaeologist, and a whole load more. So yeah, there's no kind of redundancy of anyone there. They all have their own place and are very, very, very important to this overall mission, and for Luffy to complete his dream of becoming the Pirate King. Overall, it's a story about freedom. As, you know, a group of pirates, they can go anywhere they like, even if the forces at play try to oppress them. You know, there might be a marine presence at a specific island. Well, that's not going to get into the way. That's not going to stand in the way of Luffy. He will progress despite anything because he is an unstoppable force. The Marines who attempt to control piracy are corrupt and are controlled by the world leaders who enact very many massive injustices, such as owning slaves and just murdering people for no reason, for daring to look at them or breathe near them. They kind of host these like battle royales where slaves fight one another for entertainment. It's very, very, very grim. Despite being a lot of fun, One Piece is still a very, very dark story with, you know, some very, very depressing backstories that might just kind of force a tear to leave your eyes. So, why did I pick One Piece for this prompt? Because I haven't actually answered this question yet, really. Well, after almost every single arc in this book, they wind down on their ship or on the islands they're at, and they have a massive party. They share food, they share drink, they act like massive goofballs, and just overall have an absolutely brilliant time. It's a great way to just reset mentally after all the excitement, tension, and stakes that have built up over the course of each arc. There is also an important arc later on in One Piece called Whole Cake Island, where the Straw Hats, which is the name of the crew, essentially gate crash a massive party that would change the political landscape of the world forever. There is literally wedding cake. A lot goes on. It's very fun, whimsical, and has a kind of Alice in Wonderland sort of vibe and some influences to it. So that kind of fits perfectly. So while, you know, as I said, there's a lot of parties over the course of this this manga, there's also an arc which is very much a party for the whole arc, and yeah, it's up to the Straw Hats to ruin everyone's day. Prompt number 6 is Mexico, tourism and beaches. Name and talk about a book set on the coast or an island. I think the perfect pick for a prompt like this is Lord of the Flies by William Golding, but staying with the theme of adventure and piracy, I'll instead answer with Treasure Island by Robert Louis Stevenson. It's a lot more fun that way. This book follows Jim Hawkins, who under certain circumstances becomes the owner of a very, very famous treasure map that is certain to lead its owner to a lot of wealth, so long as they can find it and dig it up. Treasure Island is a story about going on an adventure with a band of misfits that could potentially suffer from scurvy. It's a story about greed, betrayal, with naval blockades, musket firing action, as well as the old kerfuffle with some very sharp sabers. This book is a lot of fun. It was published in 1882 as a bedtime story for children to kind of enable their powers of imagination. However, it has stood the test of time as a story for children and adults alike. This book has absolutely brilliant prose. Given its age, it does certainly use some old-timey language that can take a little bit of getting used to and a bit of patience. But despite all of this, it's still an incredibly accessible story, and you don't really have to pause and really decipher the language very much. It is quite easy to pick up and just get on with. This book is very exciting from start to finish. You get really sucked into this whole situation on the island and their kind of adventure, their travels, who is currently where, who is fighting who is winning. The main character sees a lot of growth over the course of the book, eventually becoming somebody really, really brave that throws a kind of massive spanner into the works for a lot of people, which is very impressive because he's very, very young and a lot younger than everybody else kind of in this situation. The villain is very cunning too. When he's present, he kind of takes center stage, really pulling you in and making you want to read when he's present, and not to say that the rest of it's bad at all. The dialogue is a lot of fun, and I reckon that a lot of pirate movies have taken inspiration from Treasure Island for their villains. He's kind of like the poster boy of piracy. This book is still very popular today within classical circles, and there really, really is a reason for that. I hope that you pick it up one day and that you enjoy it as much as I did. Prompt number 7 is Italy, which is for cuisine, fine food and wine. Talk about a book, fiction or non-fiction, where food and or drink is central to the plot. Well, I have the absolute perfect answer to this prompt, which is The Chef of the Five Gods duology by Beth Cato, which kicks off with 1,000 recipes for revenge. This series isn't perfect, and I preferred book 1 over book 2, but it certainly does fit the description perfectly. I found the magic system in this book really, really fascinating. Imagine Chinese natural medicines, but they kind of made a ramped up magic system out of that, based on 5 different gods blessing themselves to different types of food and ingredients. The food-based magic system is very much front and center, and this would be a completely different series without it. This series follows Ada, a rogue chef who has escaped her duties as a chef for the nobles and royalty, and as a consequence for this, she is hunted by assassins. As I mentioned, because the series is based on a food-based magic system, the chefs are essentially magicians and they are controlled by the courts to do various different things. So by escaping and becoming a rogue, she very much puts a target on her back. It's also kind of a generational story in the sense that it follows a daughter, a mother, and a grandma, who are all in very different stages of their lives, and their POVs are split up for the majority of the book. This book has a lot of politics between several different kingdoms in this world, and it has some mythical type civilizations too for a bit of intrigue. There are two main POVs, which are both great, though I did find myself enjoying one considerably more than another. It follows a person and their grandma who are split up for the majority of the book, but I really enjoyed learning about this world from the daughter's POV. She isn't quite as jaded yet, and it's really, really easy to see, but I also really enjoy the kind of trope where you do a majority of the learning about the world building and everything like that through the younger person's eyes, because it makes sense, right? They're still taking all the information and pulling bits from here, pulling bits from there, and just making this kind of mental picture about the state of affairs and all the different kinds of people in the world and the kinds of different kingdoms and cities and who's important and stuff like that. So following along with the POV like that, you do get to very naturally form your own opinion about what this world is really like. It is a little bit generic, as it is about two kingdoms at war, but the execution of it is pretty good overall. It's kind of vegan propaganda, but in a good way, as one of the most powerful forms of magic is ingesting fairies, i.e. living organisms, and some characters decide that this is actually messed up and I'm not going to do this anymore, which does put them at a disadvantage. But they have to get a bit more unique and creative with what they do and how they try and combat the different situations that kind of prop up. So yeah, there's a fantasy series based on food for you. Prompt number 8 is Austria. Alpine landscapes, ski, snowboarding. Talk about a book where a sport or contest, real or imagined, is a central focus of the story. For this prompt, I'm going to choose Battle Royale by Koshin Takumi. There's a bit of controversy online as to whether Suzanne Collins was inspired to write Hunger Games based on this book, so you can consider it the progenitor of the Battle Royale genre. Similarly to Hunger Games, this is also a kind of dystopian Battle Royale book. Every year, one random class is chosen to participate in the Battle Royale. It's very real. It's not like a simulated Battle Royale. They don't hop into a VR machine. They are literally kidnapped and abducted with gas and then taken to a remote island where they can't escape and are forced to fight for their lives. Only one person can win. This book does its characters incredibly well. Our main character is Shuya, who is this rock and roll obsessed teenager, obsessed with Vividly, as well as what happens and everything. It's a very memorable story and an absolute icon of the Battle Royale genre. I can't recommend this book highly enough. Prompt number 9 is South Africa, The Rainbow Nation. Talk about a book from a diverse author you've enjoyed. Race, ethnicity, gender, sexual orientation, anything. So for prompt number 9, I'm going to go for Satanic Verses by Salman Rushdie. I chose this one because whilst I don't really have a religion, I was brought up as a Christian, and so reading a book very much inspired by Islamic law does feel very different and diverse, especially when a lot of Western books are in some sense based on the Bible. A fun fact, or maybe not so fun fact, is that this book is deemed highly controversial by certain sects of Muslims for his portrayal of the Prophet Muhammad, and he ended up being stabbed for some of the stuff that he wrote in this book, and he ended up then going on to write a short story about stabbing as a way to kind of deal with his trauma and get his story out. This book begins with Jibril and Saladin falling out of a plane. What happened to the plane? Well, you eventually get to find out, and I found this certain sub-story of the book to be very interesting. For the moment, they are simply falling, flapping their arms, singing, acting, replaying entire lifetimes, as the force of gravity takes them closer and closer to the ground. When they land and survive the disaster, events split them apart and their lives end up going in very, very different directions. Jibril begins having his manic episodes and experiences an elderly woman's life as the Archangel, beginning his metamorphosis. Champcha, on the other hand, experiences extreme racism, is mocked and made to feel like a second-class citizen within England. It's very bizarre, but he is starting his metamorphosis into a goat. Both have similar experiences at the start, but the way the events play out are very, very, very different. There is a whole other storyline with this person called Mahound, and later on a group of pilgrims. I'm not well enough versed with Islamic law nor the Quran to have grasped well the Mahound story, but the pilgrimage itself is written simply enough that someone who knows nothing about Islam can comprehend it. I did actually really enjoy this pilgrimage storyline. The way that everything concluded at the end is equal parts tender, endearing, as well as ambiguous and shocking and abrupt. I think if I was more well versed in Islamic culture, then it could have been a perfect 5 out of 5 stars book, as I would have appreciated certain aspects of the book more. And this really is a book that you can really take your time with and digest and do a lot of background reading to try and understand things more. You can really study this book if that's your thing. And despite the fact that it was written in 1988, Rushdie is an absolute visionary. He explores mental health way before it became something very commonplace and acceptable to talk about. This book is from a diverse author exploring loads of different themes, and it let me learn a little bit about a religion I know hardly anything about. It's a piece of fantastic storytelling, and I did find it to be a very challenging book. However, persevering and finishing this was a very, very rewarding experience, and it had just some absolutely brilliant subplots. So maybe if you're not invested in one, there will definitely be something in this book that you will enjoy. And prompt number 10 is the bonus prompt. Where do you live? Country, state. Choose and talk about a book, fiction or non-fiction, that reflects the culture, history and anything else of your home. So, while I don't live in Oxford, I do live somewhat close, and I ended up googling books set in Oxford for this prompt, and I found out that the Northern Lights, or Golden Compass, is actually set in Oxford, at least for some of the story. I haven't read this series yet, but I do actually own the physical book because I found it at a train station book swap shelf and I had to pick it up. It's very popular, so I think it does deserve a spot for the bonus prompt. I don't know much about this book, so I will read the Goodreads summary and maybe that will intrigue you enough to, pick it up yourself. When Lyra's friend Roger disappears, she and her daemon, Pantalaimon, determine to find him. The ensuing quest leads them to the bleak splendor of the north, where armored bears rule the ice and witch queens fly through the frozen skies, and where a team of scientists is conducting experiments too horrible to be spoken about. Lyra overcomes these strange terrors, only to find something yet more perilous waiting for her, something with consequences which may even reach beyond the Northern Lights. So yeah, there's The Northern Lights and Golden Compass by Philip Pullman. And if you've read it, what do you think of it? Do you recommend it? Let me know. Thank you so much for watching this Around the World book tag. I hope that you enjoyed it. Maybe you found it entertaining and hopefully you found something to add to your TBR. If you haven't done so already and you made it all the way to the end here, be sure to press the like button and subscribe too while you're at it. I would love to have you as part of the Brew with the Books community. And thank you again for tagging me, David. I enjoyed putting together answers to the prompts. It was a rather good and jolly time. I will tag some people in the description below, as well as the original creator of this tag, so do check all these people out. And anyway, until next time, Brew out.